It was just another quiet morning in the city, the kind of day most people wouldn't think twice about. The sky was still a soft, pale blue as the sun began to rise slowly from the horizon, casting a gentle glow on everything below. It was a crisp, cool morning, the kind that made you feel like you had a fresh start ahead of you, though most people didn't realize it. To many, it was a day like any other, one more morning in a routine filled with endless tasks and appointments, with hours that seemed to slip away like sand through an hourglass. But for Lily Bennett, it was anything but ordinary. She stood at the street corner, a place she had found herself countless times before. Her feet were planted firmly on the cracked pavement, the same stretch of road she had stood on for months now. Her fingers gripped a small, colorful bouquet of flowers, tightly wrapped with a piece of twine she had tied herself. The flowers were simple wildflowers, actually. The kind that grew along the sides of the roads and in hidden patches of grass, not the fancy, expensive varieties you saw in flower shops. The petals were bright reds, yellows, and purples, giving the flowers a cheerful look, though their true beauty only seemed to shine in the hands of someone who truly appreciated their quiet elegance. The air was fresh, but not too chilly, and the streets were just beginning to wake up. There was a stillness to the morning, the kind that felt almost peaceful. But Lily didn't feel peaceful. She was used to the noise of the city, the rush of people as they passed by, their minds focused on whatever task they were off to do next. Most didn't even glance at her, even as she stood there, offering the flowers she had carefully gathered with all the love she could give. As she stood there, she couldn't help but notice the people walking past her. Their faces were familiar, like the faces of people who had walked these streets for years. There was the man with the heavy briefcase, hurrying to get to work. There was the woman in a bright red coat, her heels clicking on the sidewalk, her eyes glued to her phone. There was the young couple, arms linked, laughing softly as they shared some private joke. They passed her by, absorbed in their own worlds, their steps quick and sure. None of them stopped. None of them gave the flowers in her hands a second glance. It wasn't that Lily minded, really. She was used to it by now. She had learned to be invisible to the people around her, to accept that she wasn't someone who caught their attention. She wasn't someone they cared about. She wasn't someone who mattered. To the world, she was just another face in the crowd, nothing more than a blur of color and motion. Just another girl with big dreams that she would never be able to reach. In this city, it was hard to stand out. Everywhere you looked, there were people chasing after their own dreams, their own ambitions, their own pieces of success. And Lily? She was just trying to survive. She had grown up in the city, and in some ways, it had chewed her up and spit her out. She had big dreams once, dreams of making it big, of doing something that would make a difference, something that would make people notice her. But over time, those dreams had started to feel more like a burden than a blessing. Each day, she stood on the same corner, selling the flowers she had picked with her own hands, hoping for someone to stop and notice her. Hoping for someone to see her, not just the flowers she sold. But most didn't. Most just hurried past, lost in their own thoughts, their own worlds, with no room for anyone else. And so, Lily stood there, quietly, hoping, waiting. Her fingers tightened on the stems of the flowers, and for a moment, she felt the familiar sting of disappointment. Would anyone stop today? Would anyone take a moment to see her, to see the effort she had put into gathering the flowers, to see her as something more than just a face in the crowd? As she stood there, she couldn't help but wonder how much longer she could keep doing this. The city was full of people who had everything: money, status, power. And Lily? Well, she had nothing but a handful of wildflowers and the hope that someone might care. And yet, for some reason, she wasn't ready to give up. Maybe it was because she still believed that something good could happen. Maybe it was because, deep down, she knew there was more to life than this. Or maybe it was simply because, in her heart, Lily still wanted to believe that people were capable of kindness, of stopping to look at someone like her. But as the minutes ticked by, no one stopped. The flowers in her hands began to feel heavier, the colors less bright. She sighed, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. Just then, something unexpected happened. A sleek black car slowed down in front of her, its dark windows glinting in the early morning light. It wasn't the usual sound of the cars rushing by, nor was it like the hurried, noisy commutes she was so familiar with. This car, it seemed to be slowing down just for her. Lily blinked, confused. Was it stopping? It was hard to tell. Cars didn't stop here for people like her. Not for someone standing on a corner, selling wildflowers. And yet, as the car came to a complete stop, the window rolled down. Lily's breath caught in her throat as a man's voice spoke from inside. It wasn't a voice she recognized, and his face was partially hidden behind sunglasses. But there was something about him that made her pause. "Those are beautiful flowers," the man said, his voice calm and almost detached. Lily's heart skipped a beat. "Thank you," she said quietly, surprised by the sudden attention. The man's eyes flicked to the flowers in her hand before he reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out a crumpled bill and handed it to her. "Keep the change," he said, his voice lacking any real warmth. He didn't smile, didn't even seem to care much about the flowers. He just handed her the money and began rolling up the window. Lily stood there, stunned. What had just happened? Was this some kind of joke? Did he even care about the flowers at all? Or was he just handing her money to get her out of the way? Before she could process anything, the car sped off, leaving her standing there, holding the crumpled bill in her hand. She stared down at it, her mind racing. She couldn't even focus on the money itself, not yet, anyway. What had just occurred? The man hadn't seemed interested in her flowers, not truly. He hadn't even looked at her, really. And yet, he had stopped. He had noticed her, if only for a moment. But what did it all mean? Lily stood there for a few moments longer, her hands still gripping the bouquet. She thought about the flowers, about how much effort it had taken for her to gather them, about how they had become a symbol of everything she was trying to hold onto in this world. But in the end, what did it matter? The car was gone, and so was any chance of understanding why the man had stopped. For a long time, she stood there, staring at the crumpled bill, wondering what had just happened and why she felt, deep down, that something had just changed. She couldn't explain it, but she had a strange feeling that this was only the beginning. Something bigger was coming. And Lily had no idea what it was. But that morning, for the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of hope, just the tiniest flicker that maybe, just maybe, things were starting to turn in her favor. Lily Bennett had lived her entire life in a city that made people feel like ants. Big, busy, fast-paced, the kind of place where nobody had time for anything or anyone, especially not someone like her. It was a place where wealth and power ruled, and people with money walked past people like her as if they were invisible. It was a world where only the loudest voices were heard, and the quiet ones like Lily's were ignored, dismissed, or simply forgotten. Lily wasn't new to this. She had grown up in the city, and she had long accepted the fact that she was just a dot in a world full of giants. But even with that acceptance, it still hurt. Every time she watched people walk by, lost in their own worlds, she couldn't help but feel small. It wasn't just the way they looked through her, as if she didn't exist. It was the way they looked past her, like she was just one of 1,000 obstacles in their way. She wasn't angry. Lily wasn't the kind of person who held grudges. No, it was more of a quiet sadness that weighed on her shoulders, a sadness that came from knowing she'd never fit into their world. She was never going to be rich or important or impressive like them. And so, she stood on the corner, day after day, selling flowers she had picked herself, trying to make just a little money. She tried not to let it get to her. But sometimes, the loneliness of it all seeped in like cold rain, and she couldn't help but wonder if things would ever be different. People passed by. Hundreds of them, in suits, in dresses, carrying bags, heads held high, walking with purpose. They didn't stop. Not even for a moment. Lily's flowers were beautiful bright reds, yellows, and purples, but they weren't enough to make anyone pause. She could see their eyes flicker over her, but that was all. A quick glance, a slight movement of the head to the side. And then they were gone. Lily had grown used to the cold stares and dismissive glances. It was just part of life now. She knew she wasn't important to them. She wasn't anything special. She was just a girl with a handful of wildflowers, standing on a corner. The city was full of people like her, people who didn't matter. But today, something felt different. She couldn't explain why. There was a shift in the air, a quiet change in the way the sun touched the streets, the way the wind moved through her hair. Maybe it was just her imagination, maybe she was hoping for something, anything to break the monotony. But whatever it was, Lily couldn't shake the feeling that today wouldn't be like the others. She stood there, holding her flowers, her heart pounding a little faster than usual. She told herself to stay calm, not to get her hopes up. It was silly to think anyone would stop. After all, people never stopped for her. But the thought still lingered at the back of her mind, like a tiny seed of hope she wasn't quite ready to let go of. Minutes passed, and nothing happened. Lily watched as people walked by, each of them too busy to notice her, too distracted by their own lives to give her a second thought. The flowers in her hands were starting to feel heavy again. The bright colors seemed to dim in the growing silence, and Lily couldn't help but wonder how much longer she could keep doing this. How much longer could she stand here, invisible, watching the world rush past her? It wasn't fair. She had dreams, big dreams. She wanted more than this. She wanted to be seen. She wanted to be someone who mattered. But it felt impossible. In a city this big, how could she ever stand out? How could someone like her ever make a difference? She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to push those thoughts away. But they kept coming back, louder now. The noise in her head drowned out the sounds of the city, the honking horns, the busy footsteps of people rushing by. It was just her and the flowers. The weight of them, the hope she placed in them, the weight of every unanswered prayer she had ever whispered. And then, just as she was about to let go of the thought that anything would ever change, it happened. A sleek black car slowed down in front of her. Lily's eyes snapped open, her heart racing. She had seen luxury cars on this street before, of course. Expensive cars were everywhere in this part of town. But they never stopped for her. They always sped past, too fast for her to even catch a glimpse of the people inside. This time, though, the car came to a slow, deliberate stop right in front of her. Lily blinked, unsure if she had imagined it. She had seen people in these cars, important people, powerful people, but none of them ever paid attention to her. Not in a meaningful way. Yet, this car had stopped. It wasn't the usual honking or impatient driver trying to push through traffic. No. This car had stopped, like it was waiting for her. Waiting for her to do something. The car window rolled down, revealing a man inside. He was wearing sunglasses, and his face was partially hidden, but there was something about him that immediately caught Lily's attention. He was different. There was an air of authority about him, something she couldn't quite place. It wasn't just his expensive clothes or the fact that he was driving a car worth more than she could ever dream of. No, it was the way he looked at her, like he had just found something worth noticing. Lily felt a flutter in her chest. Her breath caught. This was strange. This wasn't how things worked. People like him didn't stop for people like her. Yet here he was, looking at her, looking at the flowers she was holding. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The world around her quieted, and all she could hear was the faint hum of the car's engine. She wasn't sure what to do. Should she speak? Should she ask if he wanted to buy some flowers? Was this real? The man didn't smile. He didn't say anything for a few long seconds, his eyes scanning the flowers before they shifted to her face. There was no warmth in his gaze, no kindness, just a cold, almost indifferent look. Lily stood there, unsure of what to do or say. She had never been in a situation like this before, and she felt a rush of nerves flood her chest. Why had he stopped? What did he want from her? Without saying a word, the man reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out a crumpled bill, the kind that looked like it had been shoved into his pocket and forgotten about. He didn't even look at it as he handed it to her. He didn't care about the money or the flowers. He just held out the bill to her, his hand not even extended all the way, just an offering that seemed to say, "Here. Take it, and be on your way. Keep the change," he muttered in a voice that was low and uninterested. He didn't even wait for her to respond. His eyes had already drifted away, back to wherever he had been before this brief, odd encounter. Lily stared at the money in her hand. It was a crumpled bill, nothing special. But it felt heavy. He didn't even look at her. He hadn't cared about the flowers. He hadn't cared about her. He had given her money because it was easier than acknowledging her as a person. It was just a transaction. A brief, cold transaction. As the car roared back to life, its engine roaring to drown out the quiet tension in the air, the man was gone. Lily stood there for a moment, her hand still holding the crumpled bill, her heart sinking with the weight of it all. She couldn't understand what had just happened. Why had he stopped? Why had he given her money? And most of all, why did it hurt so much? Lily stared at the money in her hand, feeling a rush of conflicting emotions flood through her. On the surface, it seemed like a small thing, a man giving her some money. But it wasn't about the money. It was about how he treated her, how he saw her. He hadn't seen her as a person. He had seen her as an inconvenience, someone to pay off quickly so he could go on with his life. But what hurt the most was that he had looked at her. He had noticed her. And yet, he hadn't seen her. Not really. Lily stood there for a long time, her fingers gripping the bill, the weight of it like a stone in her palm. It felt like the world had just shifted, but she didn't know how to react. There was so much more to this than just the man and the flowers. Something had changed. She could feel it deep inside her, but she didn't know what it was. Little did Lily know, this encounter would set off a chain of events that she couldn't have imagined, a series of twists that would change her life forever. The man in the car, the crumpled bill, the cold indifference, it was just the beginning. And Lily had no idea that everything was about to change. The next day, Lily stood at her usual corner, the flowers gently swaying in the breeze as people passed by, their faces lost in their own thoughts. She felt that familiar sense of hopelessness creeping in, though she tried not to let it show. The world around her was always in a hurry, moving too fast for her to catch up. She had been standing on this street corner for what felt like years, hoping for just a little recognition. Every day, the same routine: stand there, offer the flowers, watch people walk by, and hope that someone might notice her. But deep down, Lily had grown used to the disappointment. People didn't stop. They never stopped. It was a fact of life she had come to accept. But today, something felt different. Lily wasn't sure what it was at first. It wasn't a specific thing, just a feeling in the pit of her stomach, a sense of being watched. She glanced over her shoulder, half expecting someone to be standing there, staring at her. But there was no one. The street was busy, like always, but for some reason, Lily couldn't shake the feeling that there was someone or something paying attention to her. Maybe it was just the strange energy in the air, or maybe she was just hoping for something to change. It didn't matter. She tried to push the feeling aside and focused on what she knew, selling flowers. She held out her bouquet of bright yellow daisies, hoping someone would stop, even just for a moment. But then, she saw it. A sleek black car, moving slowly down the street. It wasn't anything special, but there was something about the way it moved, controlled, almost deliberate. Lily felt her heart skip a beat. Could it be? Could it be him again? Her breath caught in her throat as the car slowed down. It didn't just drive by like the others. No. It stopped. Right in front of her. Lily froze. She was still unsure if this was real. Was she dreaming? She didn't know what to think. She watched, her eyes wide, as the window of the car began to roll down. There he was again. The man from yesterday. He was sitting in the driver's seat, wearing the same dark sunglasses, his face partially hidden from view. But this time, something was different. He didn't seem as distant, as cold as before. He looked at her flowers briefly, then locked eyes with her. For a moment, neither of them said anything. It was as if the world had quieted around them, and all that mattered was this strange encounter. Lily stood there, unsure of what to do. Was he going to give her money again? She didn't know if she could handle that again, the feeling of being treated as if she were invisible, as if her worth was nothing more than the price of the flowers in her hands. She wasn't just a poor girl on the street. She was a person, a woman with dreams, with hopes. But then, something unexpected happened. The man reached into his coat pocket, and this time, instead of the usual crumpled bill, he pulled out something else. An envelope. He held it out to her, and his voice was softer now, almost apologetic. "Here," he said, his tone different from the previous day. There was a quiet sincerity in his words that Lily hadn't heard before. "I didn't mean to be rude yesterday." Lily blinked in surprise. Rude? The man had barely spoken to her yesterday, but she could feel the sincerity in his words. She wasn't sure what to think, but there was something in his tone that made her hesitate. For the first time, she didn't feel like he was just tossing money at her to be rid of her. There was something more, something she couldn't quite understand yet. Without saying anything, she slowly reached out and took the envelope from him. Her hands trembled slightly as she held it. It was thick, the paper smooth and cool beneath her fingertips. The weight of it felt different from anything she had held before, and it made her stomach tighten with a mix of excitement and uncertainty. The man didn't wait for her to open it. He simply nodded and, with a slight wave, rolled the window back up. The car revved its engine and drove away, leaving Lily standing there, the envelope in her hand, her mind racing with questions. What was inside? What did this mean? Lily quickly opened the envelope, her heart beating faster now. She was careful, trying not to tear it as she pulled out the contents. There was a single sheet of paper, a note written in neat, precise handwriting. She unfolded it and read the words, her eyes scanning the message. "Thank you for not giving up on what you believe in." Lily blinked, the words taking a moment to sink in. She had to read it again to make sure she wasn't imagining it. "Thank you for not giving up on what you believe in." It was a simple note, but it carried so much weight. Lily could feel her chest tighten as she read it over and over. What did he mean by this? What belief? She had never met this man before, and yet somehow, it felt like he understood something about her, something she hadn't shared with anyone. She had no idea what to think. But there was more. She looked at the note again, and this time, she saw what had been tucked underneath the paper. She gasped in shock. There, lying beneath the note, was a check. It was made out to her, Lily Bennett. And the amount. Lily's heart stopped as she stared at the number written on it. It was a generous sum, enough to change her life forever. Enough to pay off debts she had been struggling with for years. Enough to help her leave behind this life on the street and do something more. It was more than she had ever dreamed of. Lily's hands shook as she held the check, her mind spinning. Was this real? Had someone really given her this kind of money, just like that? It felt like a dream. But it wasn't just the money that stunned her. It was the message, the note that seemed to speak directly to her. She had always believed in something. She had always believed that there was more to life than this, that there was a purpose for her beyond standing on this corner every day, waiting for something to change. But no one had ever really understood that. No one had ever taken the time to see her as more than just a girl with flowers. Until now. For the first time in what felt like forever, Lily felt seen. She felt like someone understood her. But the question still lingered in her mind, why? Why had this man stopped for her? Why had he given her so much? And why had he written that note? Lily stood there, the check still in her hand, her mind racing with possibilities. She didn't know who this man was or why he had chosen her, but she couldn't deny the power of what had just happened. This was a turning point. Something had shifted. Her life wasn't going to be the same anymore. The future, once uncertain and dark, suddenly felt full of possibility. But as the day went on, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story, something deeper, something hidden. Little did she know, this small act of kindness would be the spark that ignited a chain of events far beyond what she could imagine. And the man in the black car would return, bringing with him answers, questions, and a mystery that Lily could never have predicted. The next day, Lily stood at her usual corner again, clutching the delicate bouquet of wildflowers she had picked that morning. Her hands were warm from holding the stems, but her mind was far away. The last few days had been a whirlwind of confusion and excitement, and she couldn't help but feel like everything she knew was about to change. She stood there, almost mechanical in her movements, offering the flowers to every person who passed by, but her thoughts were miles away. She couldn't stop thinking about the check, the note, and the man in the black car. She hadn't been able to shake the feeling that something was going to happen today. Something big. And then, just as she had thought, she saw the car. At first, it looked like any other car. A sleek black vehicle, moving slowly down the street. But as it got closer, Lily's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't just driving past like it had before. This time, the car came to a sudden halt right in front of her. Lily's breath caught in her throat. She wasn't sure what to do, but before she could even think, the car door swung open. The man stepped out, and Lily froze, her eyes wide with disbelief. This wasn't just any stranger. This wasn't just a wealthy businessman or someone passing by. This man was someone she had only ever seen on television, in news stories, in magazines. He was someone everyone knew. The moment his feet hit the pavement, Lily's heart pounded in her chest. It was Elon Musk. Lily stood frozen, unable to move or speak. She had seen him countless times on the news, heard about his companies, his successes, his ambition. But now, here he was, standing right in front of her. She couldn't believe it. This felt like a dream. How could this be real? What was he doing here? Lily, right? Elon Musk asked, his voice warm and friendly, but carrying an undeniable authority that seemed to demand attention. Lily just stared, still unable to comprehend what was happening. She nodded, though she wasn't sure if he was waiting for an answer. I've been following your work, he continued, stepping closer with a serious expression. You're far too talented to be out here selling flowers. You deserve so much more. Lily blinked, her heart racing. He had been following her work? What work? She hadn't done anything extraordinary. She had been standing on the street corner, selling flowers, hoping for a chance to make something of herself. She had no idea what he was talking about. What do you mean? She stammered, still in shock. I don't understand. I'm just someone selling flowers. Elon smiled, his expression softening. No, you're much more than that, he said, looking at her with an intensity that made her feel like he could see straight into her soul. I've seen the way you put your heart into everything you do. The passion, the persistence. That's rare. Most people give up too easily, but you haven't. And that's why I'm here. Lily's mind was spinning. She had never expected anything like this. Here she was, standing on a street corner, talking to one of the most influential men in the world, and she didn't know what to say. She didn't even know what he meant by following her work. What could he have possibly seen in her? But before she could ask any more questions, Elon continued, his voice steady and full of purpose. I want to offer you something, he said. A chance to do something bigger, something meaningful. Something that will change your life. Lily blinked, trying to process his words. She felt a wave of disbelief wash over her. Did he just say what she thought he said? Was he offering her something? What do you mean? Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She couldn't believe it. Was this a joke? Was someone playing some kind of prank on her? I want to offer you a chance to work with me, Elon said, his tone serious now. To be a part of something bigger than flowers. Something that can change the world. He paused, allowing the weight of his words to sink in. You're capable of so much more than you know. I've seen your potential, Lily. And I want to help you realize it. Lily's heart was pounding in her chest. Her hands trembled as she held the flowers, unsure if she should drop them or hold on tighter. A part of her wanted to laugh. This couldn't be real, could it? She had always dreamed of something more, but never in a million years had she imagined it would come to her like this. Never in her wildest dreams did she think someone like Elon Musk would stand in front of her and offer her a chance like this. Me? She asked, her voice almost inaudible. But I'm just a girl selling flowers. I don't. You're more than that, Elon interrupted gently, his eyes fixed on her with an understanding that seemed almost beyond what was normal. I know you've been struggling, but I believe in you. I see something in you that others don't. Something they miss because they're too busy chasing their own interests. He paused, his gaze softening. I want to change that. I want to give you the opportunity to show the world what you're truly capable of. Lily felt her knees weaken. She wanted to pinch herself to see if she was dreaming, but the reality of the situation hit her like a ton of bricks. Elon Musk. The man who had revolutionized industries, built companies worth billions, who had been the face of incredible innovations. He was standing in front of her, offering her a chance to do something she had never imagined. To change her life. To make a difference. But even though the excitement surged through her veins, there was a part of her that was scared of the unknown, scared of stepping out of the life she knew, and into something entirely different. She had always felt like an outsider. She had always felt like she wasn't worthy of greatness. And now, here was a man who saw something in her she couldn't see in herself. I don't know what to say, Lily murmured, her voice trembling. I don't know if I'm ready. I've always just been, me. Elon smiled again, this time with a kindness that made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as invisible as she had thought. You're more ready than you know. I can see it in you. You've got everything it takes, Lily. All I'm offering you is the chance to prove it to yourself and to the world. Lily looked down at the flowers in her hands, the same simple flowers she had been selling every day for as long as she could remember. They had been her life, her only way to survive. But in that moment, she realized something, they no longer defined her. They were just the beginning. The opportunity Elon was offering her was a chance to prove to herself and the world that she was capable of more. For the first time in years, Lily felt like she was standing on the edge of something new. Something bigger. And though she still felt the weight of doubt pressing down on her, she knew deep down that this was the moment she had been waiting for her entire life. Elon stepped back, giving her space to think, his gaze never leaving her. "You don't have to decide right away," he said softly. "But I want you to know that the offer is there. I believe in you, Lily. And I know you're going to do great things." Lily stood there for what felt like an eternity, her thoughts swirling. She looked at the man in front of her, the man who had changed everything with just a few words. She could hardly believe this was real, but she also knew that this moment, this encounter, was her chance to change everything. Her future. Her destiny. It was all in her hands now. "Okay," she finally said, her voice steady. "I'm ready." The weeks and months that followed Lily's encounter with Elon Musk were a blur of rapid changes. It was as if the world she had known, the one filled with rejection and unnoticed dreams, had been swept away, leaving her with a new reality. But even as her life transformed, she never forgot where she came from. And she never lost the feeling that everything she was experiencing now had come from one single, life-changing moment. In the beginning, it was overwhelming. The first few weeks were filled with a mix of disbelief and wonder. Lily had been given an opportunity, but with that opportunity came expectations. Expectations that she had never faced before. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just going through the motions, she was building something that could last. She was making something that mattered. Elon didn't just offer her advice or money, he offered her his unwavering belief in her potential. He knew she had talent, but he also knew that talent alone wasn't enough. To truly succeed, Lily needed the resources, the connections, and the right environment to grow. And Elon, with his vast network and understanding of business, made sure that Lily had everything she needed to succeed. Her journey began with small steps. Elon introduced her to a team of mentors, experts who guided her as she learned the ins and outs of running a business. These were people who believed in her, not because of her past, but because of the person she was becoming. With their help, Lily honed her skills and turned her passion for art into a legitimate business. It wasn't just about selling flowers anymore. Her creativity expanded, and she began to design custom floral arrangements, create art pieces, and even develop a brand that stood for more than just aesthetics. It stood for resilience, hard work, and the belief that anyone could change their fate if they were given the chance. At first, the changes were small. Lily's floral designs became more popular. Her work was displayed in local galleries, and her pieces were snapped up by people who recognized the beauty in what she created. Slowly but surely, her name began to spread beyond the city. She was no longer just the girl on the corner, selling flowers. She was an artist, a creator, someone who had a vision and a story that resonated with others. But the real turning point came when Lily was invited to showcase her work at an international exhibition. It was an opportunity she could never have imagined, one that would put her talents on a global stage. This was her chance to prove to the world that she was no longer invisible. Elon continued to be her guide, but he didn't hover over her. He trusted her to take the reins, to make decisions, and to shape her own future. It was a fine balance of support and independence, and Lily thrived under it. She learned quickly, making connections with other artists and business owners, finding collaborators who shared her vision and values. As her success grew, so did her sense of responsibility. Lily knew that her success wasn't just about her, it was about the people who had believed in her when no one else had. It was about the community she had grown up in, the people who had struggled alongside her, and the ones who would never have the same opportunities she now had. She had a chance to make a real impact. With Elon's help, Lily launched several initiatives aimed at giving back to her community. She funded art programs for children, offering them the chance to explore their creativity in ways they might not have otherwise been able to. She started a mentorship program for young women, helping them build the confidence to pursue their dreams, no matter how impossible they seemed. And she worked with local organizations to provide job training and opportunities for those who had been overlooked, just as she once had been. Her story became one of inspiration. It spread like wildfire, reaching people from all walks of life, from every corner of the world. Her rise from selling flowers on a street corner to becoming an international artist and philanthropist showed people that anything was possible, no matter where you came from. The idea that your circumstances didn't have to define you resonated deeply with people, especially those who felt stuck in lives they didn't want. Lily's work, both as an artist and as a leader in her community, became a beacon of hope for many. She was proof that dreams could be achieved, that with the right people in your corner, you could change the course of your life. And as her business grew, so did her impact, creating ripples of change in ways that were far greater than she could have imagined. But it wasn't just about her professional success. Lily had finally found peace within herself. The girl who once thought she was invisible, overlooked by the world, had become someone who mattered not just to the people who bought her art, but to the community she had never forgotten. She had proven to herself that she was worthy of success, and now, she was making sure that others had the chance to feel that same sense of worth. The person who had once been invisible was now someone who couldn't be ignored. Lily had become a symbol of hope, a living testament to the power of perseverance, and a reminder to everyone that no one story is ever truly over. There's always a chance to rewrite it. And all the while, Elon remained by her side, not as a figurehead, but as a true friend and mentor. He didn't need to be in the spotlight. He had already changed the world in so many ways. But helping Lily achieve her potential, seeing her change the lives of others, was something that made him proud in a way that nothing else could. In the end, it wasn't about the money or the fame. It wasn't even about the incredible success Lily had found in her work. It was about the impact she had on others, the way she inspired people to believe in their own potential. It was about showing the world that change was possible and that, no matter where you came from, you could create your own future. Her journey had come full circle. Lily was no longer the girl with a bouquet of flowers on the corner. She was a force to be reckoned with, a true creator, and an advocate for change. And as she stood in front of a crowd at one of her charity events, surrounded by people whose lives she had touched, Lily finally understood the most important lesson of all. The world might try to ignore you. It might try to make you invisible. But with hard work, faith in yourself, and the right people by your side, you can change everything. And once you do, there's no limit to what you can achieve. Sometimes, the world looks at you and sees nothing. You might stand in a crowded room, surrounded by people, but still feel like you're invisible. Maybe you've been told that you're not good enough, that your dreams are too big for your life, or that you'll never make it because of where you come from or what you don't have. The world can be quick to judge, to overlook, and to dismiss those who are different or who don't fit its narrow definition of success. But all it takes is one person. Just one person who sees beyond the surface, who notices the spark inside of you when everyone else looks away. One person who doesn't care about your past or your status, who isn't judging you by the clothes you wear or the job you hold. Someone who sees your true potential, who believes in you even when you can't believe in yourself. And when that person is someone like Elon Musk, the impact is unimaginable. A single act of kindness, a moment of faith, can change everything. It's a reminder that we never know how one interaction, one chance meeting, or one simple gesture can shift the course of someone's life. For Lily, it was a single encounter that set off a chain of events she could never have predicted, one that led her to discover her worth and her place in the world. Lily didn't start with the resources or the connections that most people in the business world have. She didn't have wealth or a prestigious background to fall back on. What she had was a dream, a small act of courage, and the determination to keep going, even when the world seemed to ignore her. But she learned something powerful along the way, that your circumstances do not define your worth. Your beginnings do not determine your end. It's not where you come from, but where you choose to go that matters most. Sometimes, the quietest voices can echo the loudest in the right ears. Lily was once the girl selling flowers on a street corner, unnoticed and underestimated. But when Elon Musk saw her, he didn't see just a girl with flowers, he saw a talented artist with a world of potential. He saw someone who could make a difference, not just in her own life, but in the lives of others. He saw someone who was worthy of an opportunity, even when the world had written her off as someone with no future. Lily's story shows us that no matter how small or unnoticed we may feel, there's always room for us to grow, to make an impact, and to rise above our circumstances. The world may not always see your potential, but that doesn't mean it isn't there. And sometimes, all it takes is one person, just one, who believes in you enough to help you realize that you are capable of achieving something greater than you ever imagined. And who knows? Maybe one day, you'll find someone looking at you in the crowd, ready to change your life forever. Maybe you'll find someone who sees what others overlook, who helps you see your own worth and guides you toward the future you've always dreamed of. It might not happen today, and it might not happen tomorrow, but it can happen. Just like Lily, you may be standing in front of a door that's waiting for you to open it, one door, one opportunity, and suddenly everything changes. Lily's journey isn't just a story about success. It's about resilience, belief, and the power of connection. It's about how one person's belief can ignite something in another person that they never knew was possible. And it's a reminder to everyone, no matter how small you feel, no matter how unnoticed you may seem, that your voice matters, your dreams are valid, and you are capable of changing the world. So, take that first step. Believe in yourself, even when the world seems to doubt you. Because when you least expect it, someone might be watching, someone who will see your potential and help you turn it into something incredible. All you need is that one person, that one moment, and the courage to keep moving forward. And just like Lily, you might find that your greatest triumphs are still ahead of you. Your story is not over. The world is waiting for you to show it what you can do. So go ahead, step into your power, embrace your journey, and know that no matter where you start, you have the ability to rise, to shine, and to create the life you've always dreamed of. The world might not see you right now, but one day, they will. And when they do, you'll be ready to show them just how much you're worth.